How's it going? Welcome to No Fun Allowed, and today I'm going to be doing a review and overview of Tales from the Yawning Portal, a 5th edition module. This book is fantastic. This book is a rendition of old school adventures made for 5th edition, and they've picked some of the finest, some of the greats, and also very importantly, they've chosen a variety. There's a ton of things in here for a bunch of different people, and if you just even pick up one of these adventures, it's well worth it. So I'm just going to blanket say that this book is well worth it, and what's really great too is if you buy these online, you can typically buy them just by individual adventures. I am not going to be spoiling them until a little bit later, but I'm here to tell you that each one is different, unique, fun, flavorful, and hits on a different theme, tone, and setting, and allows you as a DM to flex your creativity and allows your players to enjoy a fantastical adventure. So without further ado, I will be going into the adventures, and as I will be going into the adventures, there will be spoilers. So players that plan on playing on any of these excellent adventures, do not watch any further. But DMs that want that added insight and to see what makes this well worth running, stick around because I'm going to be covering quite a bit, and in future videos, I will be covering all of the modules. Before we move on with the rest of the video, I want to give a huge shout out to my patrons over on Patreon who are supporting me in all my creative endeavors. If you join my Patreon, you'll be given weekly access to a whole bunch of fun goodies, as well as supporting the channel. Thank you so very much, patrons. So here we are, the entirety of the 7 adventures from Tales from the Yawning Portal. We are given the Sunless Citadel, Forge of Fury, the Hidden Shrine of Tamoa, White Plume Mountain, Dead and Thay, Against the Giants, and Tomb of Horrors. Between these 7 adventures, you will find everything that you need to have excellent roleplay, excellent combats, excellent exploration, excellent dungeon delving, excellent traps, excellent everything that makes D&D D&D. Now, all of these were made for different editions of D&D. Some of them from pretty early on, and some of them being semi-recently. All of them have been converted to 5th edition, and they've been done relatively well. I will say maybe there's a few hiccups here and there because of the way that older editions ran versus how 5e runs. And sometimes the tempo and theme of what's going on doesn't necessarily fit with 5e, but I will say that is a very minor problem for most of these adventures. Most of these adventures, you run them wholesale, pretty much as written, and they're going to work incredibly well. So what are we looking at here? First off, we get the Sunless Citadel, the level 1 through 3 adventure. This one has our players going into a dungeon filled with kobolds and goblins and bugbears, oh my. This is a classic. As your players make their way into this dungeon, they'll meet up with all these factions, and the best part is, they get to experience roleplay right from the get-go because, yeah, they get into fights with some undead and whatnot, but then they meet up with kobolds, and right then and there, your players are given the choice. They can either just start hacking and slashing away, or what is supposed to happen if you've got a group that isn't all go happy, they can have excellent roleplay with a monster type, and that allows there to be that faction dynamic. Your players can make friends with the kobolds, and thus they can go up against the goblins and maybe have some kobold support. And they hack and slash their way through, and eventually they get through to the bottom, and there they can fight some hobgoblins along the way. But then also, very importantly, they get to the next layer of the dungeon, and they can fight more baddies, and eventually hack and slash their way through, and eventually they can find a big bad druid, and this druid is bad news. He's converting people into sort of like thralls using this vampiric tree, and your players can have this big old combat right there, and that's where that cover image comes from. And this adventure is just so great, it's so classic, and it's got everything that you would want in a level 1 adventure. It's got dungeons, it's got a dragon, it's got exploration, roleplay, combat, and it just rewards players for being good, for being not just good persons, mind you, but it rewards them for excellent dungeon delving. If they explore around more, they can find more goodies, they can find little magical trinkets here and there, they can find more clues and details, they can get more experience, they can get a whole bunch of things. Especially on that first layer here, your players can do this whole secret wing. Your players don't even necessarily have to do it, but if they go do that secret wing, then they can get more goodies and maybe another potential ally along the way. So great. Now on to Forge of Fury, the level 3 through 5 adventure. This one is once again another fantastic dungeon delve where you're just hacking and slashing your way through, a dungeon that has been taken over by multiple occupants. Right from the get-go, your players are facing off against orcs. And once they go through that first layer of orcs, then they move on to the next one, and then the next one. And they're just fun little biomes. They're fun little areas. They're fun locations to explore around in. Past the orcs, your players will go up against a whole bunch of troglodytes and maybe some more things. And then they have freedom to explore around. They can go to different areas. They can see the different sites. They can explore to their heart's content. Moving on, they go up against potentially a roper and gray oozes. Gray oozes are really scary at low levels because rip all of those non-magical armors and weapons, right? Then your players come across some Dwergar, and they are just happy to do their own thing. But your players could, of course, hack and slash their way through and get all their goodies, or they can make a deal and press further on. And if they press further on, then they'll go up against a whole bunch of other scary nonsense, and eventually it leads them to the bottom. And at the bottom is a dragon and a horde of gold. And this dragon fight is scary because it's not just a dragon in a 25 by 25 square room with no cover. There is a whole bunch of dynamics to this fight. There's water that the dragon is using to its advantage. Your players have to cling along a very, very narrow wall. You know, this is such a dynamic combat encounter. Your players will definitely remember it for ages to come because it's not just a regular dragon fight. Once again, this adventure just highlights the classic dungeon delving feel, and it feels so good. Next up, we have Hidden Shrine of Tamoa-chan. Now, Hidden Shrine of Tamoa-chan is incredibly unique because when you think of dungeon delving, you start at the top and just start hacking and slashing your way down. But that's not how Hidden Shrine of Tamoa-chan is actually written. In Hidden Shrine of Tamoa-chan, you actually accidentally end up in the dungeon, and now you've got to dungeon delve your way out of the place because you're trapped. Right there, that is so cool. That's so dynamic. I love it. And would you look at that, this map is freaking huge. There's a ton of things going on. And I love the way that your players are allowed to explore how they want to explore. They can take the left and right paths. They can go down the middles. They can backtrack. They can go forward. There's a bunch of different options in how they want to proceed. But the cool part is they need to proceed because they're trapped in here and they want to get out. That right there just adds a level of dynamic fluidity to this adventure, and it's so, so great. And as they're hacking and slashing their way through this place, there is a whole bunch of unique encounters here. Unique encounters that will get them thinking. Traps that are actually engaging. There are unique environments that get your players to actually sit there and not want to just face tank it, but actually want to, you know, analyze the situation. And then eventually they crawl their way out. And them crawling their way out isn't just the reward of getting all the gold and loot along the way. No, the reward is their survival, and that is a fantastic reward. Now moving on to the fourth adventure, White Plume Mountain. White Plume Mountain is the classic funhouse dungeon. For those of you who haven't heard or know of a funhouse dungeon is a dungeon where you kind of just throw a lot of the logic out of the window because who needs logic in a fantasy magical world? There's a whole bunch of magical traps here and a whole bunch of weird encounters and just a whole bunch of just wackadoo crazy stuff, but that's the enjoyment of it. You go and deal with a room that's got party poppers, and if you pop one party popper, then you get a bunch of gold, but then you pop another one and an air elemental pops out and hits you. You have to jump your way over some lava and some hot streams, and when you do, you go fight a vampire in a dark room. You know, like, there's no real consistency to this adventure, and that's the great part about it, is your players will absolutely not know what's going to happen next. And that just weird, you know, thing of just moving from next location to next location is so, so fantastic. This adventure is just such a classic go-to. And the reason why they're doing this adventure is because located around this dungeon, there are 3 artifacts. And if they get these 3 artifact weapons, they're pretty dope. They're pretty strong. They're pretty powerful. You know, and that leads to just further and further greater things. So now we've covered classic dungeon delving. We've covered reverse dungeon crawling. We've covered now funhouse dungeon crawling. What's next? Next up is a mega dungeon crawling. With the adventure Dead and Thay, your players are dropped into a mega dungeon. And when I say mega dungeon, this place is mega. There is over 100 locations in this dungeon. And it just feels so great to explore. This will absolutely get your players exploring for a long time. And another great part about this too is you can take the individual little biomes here. You can see that there's a red marker here cutting out the different biomes. And each one of these biomes is actually a fun little dungeon on its own. So you can take this completely wholesale, run it full mega dungeon, or maybe you just take it and carve out a little piece of it and just have your players explore that. Either way, it works incredibly well. Now, the whole theme behind this mega dungeon is that your players are coming here to try and destroy some phylacteries of liches. And so they're exploring around this Doom Vault, trying to find them and trying to find the way to get to the phylacteries location. But along the way, they're just going to get into a whole bunch of scenarios. There's so many monsters to fight here. There's so many NPCs to interact with. There's so many traps to dodge. There's so many things to explore. And this adventure fulfills the desire of the players that want to explore a big area and check marks every single location that they've been to. This absolutely delivers on it. Over 100 locations in this adventure, and each one of them feels unique. It feels fresh, and every single time you go to a new location, you don't know what's going to happen next, and that is a good thing. Now we move on to the 6th adventure, Against the Giants. Against the Giants is a little bit of a strange one here because all the other ones in this lineup feel like one just solid adventure. Against the Giants is essentially 3 adventures wrapped into one. And these adventures are pretty much the same the whole time. They're your players going against giants. It's very simple, it's very straightforward. Your players are just going to go fight some big old giants, big old monsters, and they're just gonna, do what adventurers do and kill some monsters. There really isn't too much heavy thinking with this adventure. This adventure just comes down to smart play from player characters. They're going up against monsters that are larger than life, and as you can see, they're going up against quite a lot of them. There's just a bunch of giants. They first go up against a large tribe of hill giants, and then eventually they go up against some cloud giants, and then eventually they go up against some fire giants. And it's just them hacking and slashing their way through, and that's perfectly fine. That's part of the enjoyment. Your players are going up against giants that are larger than life, and yeah, they'll be able to uncover some secret plots and agendas, and maybe they'll get some fun little interactions here and there, but quite frankly, this is just a classic monster bash and brawl. This adventure really is just for the people that love to show off their goods, showing off how awesome they are, and are able to show off the fact that they can go up against these massive foes and come out ahead. And last but certainly not least of the 7 adventures, we have the Tomb of Horrors, the classic adventure. This adventure has been ran since nearly the beginning, and it is just a staple of D&D. Tomb of Horrors is the classic puzzle dungeon. Tomb of Horrors is the classic adventure that tests not the player characters, not the player character sheets, but specifically tests the players. This adventure is incredibly lethal, incredibly deadly, and it has almost nothing to do with combat. The true lethality of the Tomb of Horrors is the traps that your players will be coming across along the way. In this adventure, there are straight up save or dies. In this adventure, there are straight up, if your player does X, they die. There is a bunch of these things. And that's a good thing, because once again, this is testing smart play. This is testing the players that have journeyed throughout all of D&D for a long time, and it rewards that creativity, it rewards them moving forward, it rewards them for intelligent play. And they are heavily rewarded because, one, if a whole bunch of people are dying along the way and the few people that live survive, that right there is the reward. But also the reward of tackling one of the hardest dungeons ever created. It is such a staple. It is so classic. It is so good. It is so fun. And what I really like about it is, in a lot of ways, it's fair. I know a lot of people will complain that this adventure is way too lethal, way too deadly. But I promise you, if you have people that sit there and don't just think, face tank go, face tank go. If you have people that actually sit there and analyze the situation and move methodically, they can tackle this dungeon. They absolutely can. But a lot of people have been conditioned to not really do that. A lot of people have been conditioned to kind of just, do their own thing. So that right there was just a quick overview of all the 7 adventures to be found in this book. What else do you find in this book? We also get a collection of the magical items that your players are going to be finding in this book. We get a collection of some new monsters here and there that were once again found within these adventures. And that's pretty much it. There is exactly 2 pages on the Yawning Portal itself, which is kind of lackluster. It doesn't really do too much. It gives you some hints on how to potentially start a adventure in the Yawning Portal and some things that you'll find in the Yawning Portal, but they are just so non-existent, they kind of just gloss it over. The really important thing about this adventure anthology is that they were made as whole 7 different, adventures that have nothing to do with each other. There is exactly like 2 sentences on how to string these adventures together, but it doesn't actually like come together in the books. If you actually want to make all 7 of these adventures string together, you're gonna have to do that yourself. But once again, that is something that I'm gonna be covering when I make my videos on this adventure. So please feel free to check those out. All in all, I thoroughly enjoy the adventures in this book. Once again, there is something for everyone. If you've got people that love to roleplay and love dungeon delving, there's adventures right in here. If you have players that just love to hack and slash, there's adventures in here. If your players love to just go ham against traps and puzzles and terrible things, oh my, there is something in there for them. This book just covers a nice variety, and that's what I love about this, the variety found in here. Yeah, not everything is going to be for someone in here for sure, but all in all, the adventures in here are so great, and I love them. They're faithful renditions of older adventures, and they work so well. So for an overall review, I would say that this is an absolute must-buy if you love classic adventures and just fantastic, straight to the point dungeon delving. But if you want something a bit meatier, if you want an actual story, if you want an actual campaign, this isn't for you because you'd have to craft the adventure yourself, or you can watch my video about how we're going to craft an adventure out of this. So tell me your thoughts on Tales from the Yawning Portal. Do you think that there's enough going on here that you enjoy, or do you think that this is going to be a pass? Have you ran some of these adventures before, but not all of them? Are you planning to run all of them as a campaign? Go ahead and tell me those things because I would love to hear it. But that's going to do it for me. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to my amazing patrons. You guys are absolutely incredible. Thank you for listening. And I cannot wait to see you all in the next one.